Mr. President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today because it is Equal Pay Day, and I would like to talk about the importance of ending, finally, gender-based discrimination of wages. That unfortunately, I can't believe we're in the year 2016, that this is still an issue that we need to address in this country, but it is. I had the privilege of serving as our state's first female Attorney General. And I think it's just the right thing to do and the obvious thing to do, and under our laws already, that equal pay for equal work should be the standard, and that all of us should be judged in our workplace by our experience, our qualification, our capability at doing our job, and nothing else. Women face many challenges in balancing work and family life. I know that firsthand from being the working mom of 2 young kids. On top of those challenges, no woman, whether she's a mother or not, should ever face gender-based pay discrimination in the workplace. Today, more than half of New Hampshire's women serve as the primary or co-earner in their household. That just underscores the serious need to address this problem. Men and women should simply receive equal pay for equal work. It's that simple. Your salary should be based on how you do your job. Because of this, I introduced the Gender Advancement in Pay, or GAP Act, along with Senators Capito, Portman, Burr, and Heller. And I want to thank my co-sponsors for supporting this effort. What we did is we built on a highly successful bipartisan pay equity law that was signed into law in my home state of New Hampshire in 2014. And the GAP Act makes it clear that employers must pay men and women equal wages for equal work without reducing the ability of employers to provide merit pay and reward merit, which all of us want, because I like to, having been the first woman Attorney General, I want to give women the opportunity to outperform their male counterparts as well, because I know we can. Today, there are a patchwork of laws that govern equal pay and an employee's ability to discuss their pay without fear of retaliation, and differing court opinions that have led to a situation where some employees receive protections not available to others, simply based on where they live. As such, the GAP Act is a sensible approach to updating, clarifying, and strengthening these laws. For 20 years, the Paycheck Fairness Act has been around in the Congress. It has never passed, and one of the reasons I think was described very well in 2010 by the Boston Globe, that said, Paycheck Fairness Act as a whole is too broad a solution to a complex, nuanced problem, but that a narrower bill that would stiffen some penalties and ban retaliation would be helpful. And that's exactly what the GAP Act is, a bill that stiffens penalties and bans retaliation and clarifies the law so that we can ensure that we have equal pay for equal work. In short, my bill updates the Equal Pay Act's factor other than sex clause. Currently, employers can explain away pay differentials by pointing to a number of factors, but one of those was ambiguously written to be a factor other than sex. Our bill closes this loophole and clarifies that any factor other than sex must be a business-related factor, such as education, training, or experience. Makes sense, doesn't it? Why would you allow a defense of a factor other than sex that has nothing to do with your job? That seems to me to be inviting discrimination. And that is why we should clarify the law to make clear that it has to be a factor related to your job, such as education, training, or experience. And this would clarify the law for employees to protect the rights of employees, and also so employers clearly would have this provision defined. The GAP Act also creates a penalty for willful violations, and this is one step further, actually, than New Hampshire's bipartisan pay equity law, and so it would put teeth into it, but I think it's important. Employers that act knowingly with the intent to discriminate should have to pay a penalty. And what we do with the funds from this penalty is we actually take the funds, rather than putting it back in the general treasury, and we are going to study the wage gap issue, make sure we have the best research on what's causing it and what's happening, and find more ways to expand opportunities for women in the workforce with better paying jobs. The GAP Act would also promote salary transparency. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, about half of workers were discouraged or outright prohibited from discussing their pay with coworkers. And so when employees are allowed to discuss their pay, they are more likely to uncover incidents of discrimination. But yet, if I'm not allowed to discuss my pay, and I find that I have a coworker that is the same situated as me, yet making more money, who's a male counterpart, and I'm not allowed to raise this because I can't discuss pay comparisons, then how am I going to raise a claim of discrimination? And so we need to make it more transparent. And we need to ensure that employees are allowed to discuss their pay. And this will make it more likely to uncover incidents of gender-based pay discrimination. So our bill prohibits retaliation against employees who discuss their pay and tells employers that they can't institute secret pay policies. And in fact, they can't ask an employee to bargain away their right to be able to talk about their pay if they choose to. And importantly, after getting feedback from stakeholders in our states, we made sure that that provision is strong, and we reintroduced the co-sponsors of this bill, an updated version of the bill this week, to ensure that there are stronger provisions for salary transparency and makes clear that employers cannot sidestep provisions that ban retaliation against employees who discuss their pay, and it prohibits pay secrecy policies that could encourage this kind of behavior. On Equal Pay Day today, it is very important that we all work together to do anything we can to end the gender wage gap. And you know what? One of the things I think we should do is let's stop the political posturing. Let's stop using this incredibly important issue as a political football, because legislation like the Paycheck Fairness Act's been around 20 years. And so I'm glad to introduce the GAP Act because I believe this is a common sense piece of legislation that actually gets at the issue by clarifying our laws in a way that benefits employees. Make sure it's clear that if you willfully violate our laws, that you're going to have to pay a penalty, and we're going to take that money and we're going to put it back into research to further help us address the pay gap. And we're also going to make clear for plaintiffs, if you want to file an EEOC claim and you also want to file an equal pay claim, that we will make sure that you can do both and your rights will be protected to do both by staying the statute of limitations while the EEOC claim is going forward. This will help plaintiffs not have to litigate in two forums, and this will also allow the EEOC to do its job and to, if they find discrimination, to be used in an Equal Pay Act claim. This is another important step both for plaintiffs and also to clarify those who are victims of discrimination, to be able to allow them to bring their rights forward. On Equal Pay Day today, I hope that we can stop making this a partisan issue and we can start actually passing legislation that will make a difference. In New Hampshire in 2014, they passed an important law. And I was glad that New Hampshire did that, and I was glad that I could introduce what New Hampshire did here in the United States Senate on a bipartisan basis and actually build on that to introduce the GAP Act with some of my colleagues. So I hope today on Equal Pay Day that we will take up legislation like the GAP Act and address gender-based pay discrimination, because we're in 2016. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I don't want to be discussing this 20 years from now. What I would like to do is have us really work on this in a serious bipartisan manner, address this, and end gender-based pay discrimination once and for all, because equal pay for equal work. It just makes sense, it's the right thing to do, and it should be how our laws work. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.